Linda Collins was born on April 17, 1962, in Pocahontas, Arkansas. Linda's family didn't have much money and lived in a home 10 miles down a gravel road. It was so rural they didn't have running water until she was a teenager. She then went on to marry Philip Smith, a circuit court judge, and they had 2 children together. Linda owned and operated the Days Inn in Pocahontas, and in 2011, she was elected to the Arkansas House of Representatives and served 1 term. After that, she ran for an Arkansas Senate seat in 2015 and won. In 2017, she and Philip divorced after he was reprimanded by the state of Arkansas for using a computer after hours for extrajudicial activities. I assume this means he was looking at naughty things on a state computer. As punishment, he agreed never to serve in the state judicial branch again. In 2019, Linda was defeated by James Sturch and lost her Senate seat. That same year, she traveled to Washington, D.C. in hopes of rebounding her political career after her recent loss. After returning to Arkansas on May 28, 2019, all text messages and social media accounts strangely went silent. After a week of not hearing anything from her, Linda's father and son went to her home on June 4th. When they arrived, they noticed her car in the driveway, but when they knocked on the door to the house, there was no answer. So they unlocked the door and went inside and found blood in the kitchen, but still no Linda. As they continued searching the home, they made their way back outside and looked under a tarp that sat in front of the garage, and that's when they shockingly found Linda's body. She had sadly been stabbed to death. Investigators determined she was likely killed not long after returning home because her luggage wasn't even unpacked. Thankfully, a home security camera caught the murderer red-handed. On June 17th, 13 days after Linda's body was discovered, Rebecca Lynn O'Donnell was arrested for her murder. O'Donnell was a former campaign worker and friend of Linda's. They also owned the hotel together. Come to find out, O'Donnell had been stealing money from their business, and when Linda confronted her about it, she snapped and murdered her. After O'Donnell was arrested, she tried to solicit inmates inside the Jackson County Detention Center to murder several people connected to Linda. These people included former Judge Harold Irwin, prosecutor Henry Boyce, Linda's ex-husband Philip, and his new wife. In the end, O'Donnell was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 43 years in prison. Michael Garr Jr. was born on July 10, 2007. In April 2023, 15-year-old Michael was living in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, and was a sophomore at Upper Darby High School. Michael was described as having an infectious smile and a big heart. He also loved sports and dreamed of becoming a sports announcer or referee, but sadly, he would never get the chance. On April 21, 2023, Michael was out walking in his neighborhood around 9 p.m. when someone stabbed him. A neighbor heard the screams and called 911. When emergency services arrived, they were sadly unable to revive him, and he died at the scene. Thankfully, neighbors had security footage that showed Michael being followed down Baltimore Pike before the stabbing occurred. Investigators were also able to get an image of the man seen running away from the scene. 11 days later, an undercover officer observed a man by the name of Marson Way exiting a house wearing the same clothes as the man caught on surveillance. He had been wearing those clothes for the last 2 weeks, and they still had Michael's blood on them. Investigators then obtained a search warrant for his home and to collect his DNA. He was also arrested at the same time because he had a warrant out for his arrest in Ohio for assault and a stolen vehicle. On top of linking him to Michael's murder, his DNA also linked him to the attempted carjacking and stabbing of a man at the Bishop Hill Apartments. However, before he could be tried for those crimes, he was extradited back to Ohio, where he pleaded guilty to the assault and stolen vehicle charges and was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. He has since been charged with first-degree murder in Michael's case, and at some point, he'll be extradited back to Pennsylvania to stand trial. A motive for the murder has not been revealed because Way is refusing to talk. Timothy Jason Smart was born on July 4, 1970, and went by Tim. In 1995, 25-year-old Tim had traveled from North Dakota to North Carolina for his job as a trucker. However, once there, he was arrested for DWI and wound up in the Brunswick County Jail. That's where he met 21-year-old Brian O'Daniels, and the two quickly became friends. Not long after, O'Daniel was released and subsequently bailed Tim out. O'Daniels then offered to let him move into his house. However, after a couple of weeks, their friendship soured. Around that same time, in July of 1995, Tim had found a job working with a different trucking company. He was scheduled to start orientation on July 17th, but never showed up. His mother, Gail, and his girlfriend were both very concerned and hadn't heard from him since July 11th, so they called the police and reported him missing. When his mother spoke with him on the 11th, he was still at O'Daniel's house, so that's where the police started their investigation. O'Daniels told police that he last saw Tim hitchhiking to catch a ride to his job interview in Camden, South Carolina. However, Gail was immediately suspicious of O'Daniel's story. 6 months later, when there was still no sign of Tim, investigators brought O'Daniels in for a polygraph and he failed. However, they lacked the evidence to arrest him, plus Tim was still missing. The sheriff's department performed an extensive search in the wooded area in Bowling Springs Lakes, but found no signs of Tim. Unfortunately, the case would then go unsolved for the next 25 years. In 2018, a local news station did a special on Tim's disappearance. This prompted an anonymous caller to contact police with information that led to the case being reopened. The caller told police they should speak with O'Daniel's friend, Randy Pickert, who was imprisoned in Florida. After a long conversation, Pickert finally confessed that he helped O'Daniels bury Tim's body. He said they pushed an old blue car over the grave to conceal the body better. By September 2019, with his new information in hand, they were able to locate Tim's skeletal remains. From there, they arrested O'Daniels and charged him with Tim's murder. In the end, O'Daniels pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. It's believed that he got upset and murdered Tim for hitting on his live-in girlfriend. Tracy Lynn Tomko was born on August 28, 1977, to parents Jerry and Marlene in Willoughby, Ohio. After high school, she studied at Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management. By August 2000, 22-year-old Tracy was living in an apartment in Akron, Ohio, and working as a financial analyst for Charles Schwab. In the early morning hours of August 11, 2000, Tracy went for her daily jog along an access road near her timber top apartments. Unfortunately, she would never make it home. Later that afternoon, 2 young boys playing in the woods found her body. While they quickly determined she was hit by a car, they were unsure if the impact of the car killed her or the fact that whoever did it dragged her into the woods and laid her face down in a puddle of water. They spent months trying to find a vehicle, but without knowing the make and model, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. That is until a triangular piece of plastic found at the scene was sent off for forensic testing, and the results showed it belonged to a teal-colored 1990s Ford Tempo. Within hours of learning about the make and model, a police officer spotted a Ford Tempo with a missing piece of plastic. The license plate was run through the system and showed it belonged to 38-year-old Ralph Blackwood. They also discovered that Blackwood took his vehicle out of state recently to get the windshield replaced. Blackwood was arrested and brought in for a police interview. It was there that he confessed to accidentally hitting Tracy and dragging her body into the woods. In the end, he pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and hit and run, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Vicki Lynn Hoskinson was born on February 2, 1976, to parents Debbie and Rodney. In September of 1984, 6-year-old Vicki was living with her mother and stepfather, George Carrollson, in Tucson, Arizona. On September 17th, Vicki rode on her bike to the mailbox to put a birthday card in it. When she failed to return after 20 minutes, Debbie sent her 11-year-old daughter, Stephanie, to look for her. Near the elementary school, Stephanie found Vicki's bicycle lying on the side of the road. She went home and told Debbie, who went and collected the bicycle and then called the sheriff's department to report her daughter missing. A massive search effort got underway, and a tip was soon received about a girl matching Vicki's description who was seen with a woman in a store. A sketch of the woman was even generated, but the girl with her turned out not to be Vicki. After the woman was cleared, Sam Hall, a coach at the elementary school near where she disappeared, came forward and reported seeing a suspicious-looking driver parked in a vehicle in an alley beside the school. He said the driver was making strange gestures and appeared to be struggling with the manual gear shift. Thankfully, he memorized the license plate and wrote it down. When he realized Vicki was missing, he gave the information to the police. A little girl came forward and said the same man had driven by her house and made an obscene gesture to her. Another witness said they saw the man back into a telephone pole. Investigators ran the license plate, and it came back to 28-year-old Frank Jarvis Atwood. A background check of Atwood showed past convictions for kidnapping and inappropriate crimes against a minor. At the time of Vicki's disappearance, he was out on parole for abuse against an 8-year-old boy. They went to the home where his vehicle was registered and discovered that it was actually his parents' home. His father, Frank Sr., a retired Army Brigadier General, received a call from his son asking for money to fix his car that had broken down in Kerrville, Texas. Thankfully, his parents did the right thing by calling the FBI and giving them the address to their son's location. On September 20th, 3 days after Vicki disappeared, agents arrived at the mechanic shop in Texas and detained Atwood and the person riding with him, James McDonald. During questioning, Atwood admitted to being in Vicki's neighborhood on the day she disappeared. However, he claimed he was in the park with his friend McDonald. He said at 3 p.m. he left to buy drugs and returned at 5 p.m. However, he never said where he had been during those 2 hours. McDonald said that when Atwood returned, he had bloodstains on his hands and his clothes. Atwood told McDonald that he got into a fight with the drug dealer and stabbed him. While no physical evidence was found inside Atwood's car to link him to Vicki's disappearance, there was pink paint from her bike found on his front bumper. They also discovered a damaged mailbox where her bike was found, which was consistent with the height of Atwood's car. On September 27th, 10 days after Vicki's disappearance, Atwood was arrested and charged with kidnapping. He was then extradited from Texas back to Arizona and pleaded not guilty. 7 months after she disappeared, on April 12, 1985, a hiker found a small skull in the Sonoran Desert, about 20 miles from where her bike was found. Dental records were used to confirm the remains belonged to Vicki. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, a cause of death could not be determined. In 1987, Atwood was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, his time on death row was far from horrible. Over the years, he got married, he obtained 2 associate degrees, a bachelor's degree in English, and a master's degree in literature. He then wrote 6 books, 5 of which were published. During that time, he tried to appeal his conviction, claiming that police tampered with evidence, but those appeals were denied. Vicki's mother, Debbie, went on to establish a victims advocacy group called We the People. In 2000, she helped institute Southern Arizona's Amber Alert system. On June 8, 2022, Atwood was executed by lethal injection at the state prison in Florence, Arizona.